Hello, this is Peter Colla again, coming to you from my new YouTube channel. I've actually just changed the name. It used to be called Peter and Anna Colla, but now we're going to start calling it Spiritual Therapies with Peter and Anna Colla. And before I get started, I'd like to give a big thanks to David Nino Rodriguez, who basically gave me the balls to start recording these. I've been wanting to do video editions of the mind-body spiritual therapeutic approaches that I try to do with my patients. I've treated 6,000 patients over the course of 35 years, but only recently have started to, in the last 10 years, started to actually apply God's truths and treat more of the cause to the mind, body, and spiritual therapy specifically in these treatments, and have had almost miraculous, sometimes quite miraculous experiences, both directly and indirectly. I have actually wrote a book called Heal Yourself for God's Sake, where I catalog a number of these experiences and try to explain them best I can, as I wrote over those were the experiences the last 12 years. And then I put them in the book. That book's been out for 3 years now. And the other book is called Quantum Ascension, where I talk about the actual process of healing on a quantum level, and how ascension actually, and healing and truths are really all the same thing on an energetic basis, and how you add those to your being and what it actually physiological effect it has on your body. Okay, without further ado, today we are going to do a sort of news analysis kind of thing out of basically from the last couple of videos that Nino has done, as well as my own. I actually had been prompted by my own mentor and dreams myself, having to do this very subject. And then he happened to be talking about it too. So I felt, well, I better do it. Breaking news from the front, from the Nino front. 600 babies found dead, and nobody cares. Over the course of the last day or few, the ever-increasing reports of floods in diverse places, coupled with the almost long-forgotten sirens call of the watch the water, there is an ever-resounding air in these signs, messages, reports, when they seep through the many layers of their social censoring occurring today. As to the origin of such spontaneous and almost seemingly simultaneous floodings, or at the very least, the drastic, almost catastrophic occurrences having to do with water, leaving any sane person who happens to open their eyes and look with the resounding question, are these occurrences happening all over the world, man-made, through some often theorized weather manipulation machine thing, or are they the wrath of God, one of his signs, a sort of revelations-like event that brings us its true meaning only to those who happen to be standing on the right mountaintop to even have a clue what's going on? Yet for either to actually be the cause or case, the why in such remote places seems seemingly insignificant little hamlets down the streets of far-off villages or long-forgotten shorelines out of sight of interest, seems as much of an argument against either of these precipitating factors, until suddenly 600 babies suddenly float to the surface out of nowhere. And this fact is also immediately censored, not only out of the local news, but from being reported all over the world. Immediately and very aggressively. Areas locked up, areas forbidden for anybody even coming in there and taking any kind of pictures whatsoever. Why? Truthers like Peter Bierhoff from Holland, David Nino Rodriguez, or even my wife, Anna Colla, and myself, who I would like to think also try to report truths as they present themselves to us, at least from the healthcare perspective. That's what we do. At least have the courage to report these travesties amid the horrendous threats of censorship or the risk of being labeled a lunatic, social deviant, not to mention financial devastation for having the audacity to open our mouths and report what's going on in the world. Yet just as fast as these things are presented, they are just as quickly shuffled onto the back pages of yesterday's news, forever forgotten like some obituary column that barely makes its presence known, along with the daily puzzle or the comic strip that makes nobody laugh any longer because the political jokes have all been proven true, and the joke is on us. 600 babies. What does the world come to when such a thing even leaks out and the public's outrage is so small, so nonchalant, a beer fart in a whirlwind? What, no drug addict resisting arrest who suddenly dies of an abusive cop? Or some Hollywood aging actress who suddenly remembers an abusive director 30 years ago? Or worse yet, an all-important news of some 250th ridiculous EO, what will suddenly make all of our lives horrendous because it's of some kind of tax that, you know, who is going to put our illustrious not-so-president is going to put it on toilet paper and price will go through the roof. Oh boy, that'd be drastic. Better hit the news on that one. It would seem clear that if such atrocities are occurring in the world, as have been reported now for almost 5 years since our true and duly elected President Donald J. Trump started his war against child trafficking, releasing for the first time in centuries these long-held secrets of child abuse, child trafficking, and satanic ritual blood-drinking, flesh-eating, pedo butt guys, monsters, who have now seemed to be exposed to the public at an ever-increasing and dramatically undeniable fashion. That these things are not only are true, but actually going on today right under our noses, just waiting for floodwaters to bring them to the surface, regardless of how far away, backwoods, or buried, or safe these monsters seem to think their hideouts are. So the strategy behind such events, if they are indeed planned or not just fluke coincidence all around the world on the same weekends, all having to do with water in every corner of the world. There has been, of course, a smidgen of reports that seem to seep through the ever-widening siphon of big corporate mass media news reporting censoring. Never by such pillars of truth such as CNN or BBC, until the shit is so thick they can hardly hold back because the stains are literally dripping from their own mouths. And they have to tell it. But as for the rest of them, David said it himself, the distraction card, trying to place the attention on someone else, or perhaps a different mountaintop, a different giant, signals what might seem as a desperate attempt to tattle on their wannabe giant boy band, sewer talking and stinking, I may add, little pansy demon CEOs who suddenly have no trouble jumping on the bandwagon to see his comrade fall, or perhaps get a bit or two into taking a larger chunk of his supporters in the mix. How funny they are to point fingers when they are, I don't know, maybe being held their feet to the fire. I don't know. Point in fact, not long ago, seemingly overnight, bundles of information was leaking from a flood of illumination regarding the grisly, demonic, and almost cannibalistic nature of many in the top Hollywood industry. And while censorship occurred, it wasn't ramped up until in the least, not right away. It just seemed to be allowed to be said. What I find interesting was there little help being offered by this so-called slander of these icons of public idol worshiping me and us worshiping them, as if they were suddenly and unsympathetically hung out to dry, basically dog food for the neighborhood jackal to come along and take a bite without fear of retribution, even from the so-called stars themselves. Now, I don't know about you, but if it was me and my friend who was suddenly and being told such horrific lies about, I would at the very least, rise up and defend him, perhaps seek some kind of legal vengeance, especially if I had so much money as they have, or so much on the line as the soon-to-be released movie starring said actor accused of blood drinking. But nothing, silence, crickets. It is as if these other jackals were just standing around watching, waiting for the chance to then feast on the course, on the main course. Maybe that's the plan all along, planned by the white hats. For now, more than a century, it has become clear that many truthers, as well as a few who merely decide to check it out for themselves, That the majority of these worldwide tragedies, mass killings, genocidal dictatorships, and even wars between countries and groups of people have all been precipitated by the same people who care less of which side wins as long as the participants are at each other's throats. They call it laughingly the divide and conquer technique, utilized and overused so as often today the signs they don't even try to any longer to hide, blatantly displaying their emblems, symbols, secret handshakes, initials, or testicle aprons for all to see, almost proud of their participation in blatant disregard for public knowledge either way. And why should they? Since they control now every major stronghold, every corporate power, at least have their own people in key places to leverage influence or facilitate their own will when called, regardless of what seeps out. The goal is not world domination any longer. They feel they already have that. Now it's a fight among themselves to divvy up the billions of minions on the dark side team, at least. Or at least those living within the borders of the faux FEMA camp prisons they have created in this system-controlled matrix we live in. Yeah, they see it as like, well, we own everything, so now let's decide which group gets what, which mountain, politics, education, media, family. Yeah, they think they control, but not the same people control all industries, transportation, energy, communication. Again, as we started so many other blogs and videos, Satan, cannot create. It's for this reason he knows he was created under us and so despises people, us, the children of God, wanting nothing else than to draw as many as possible into his dark force, his dark stank army. But the underlings, the various demonic entities that rule over each of these mountains, they are separate, divided in spiritual space, separated high grounds, locations. These are different industries, different locations. And they too are governed by the same rules that old Goldface himself must obey. And they can't be in more than one place at a time. So they each must have to rule a different one. And he can't be in all the places at the same time, so he has to delegate to one of his strongest cohorts, fallen angels, to run those different industries. And another factor that Satan must deal with, and would seem to be among his greatest flaws in this, is the dissension in ranks. They call it dissension in ranks when you have rebellion. Not that he's got rebellion, but he's dealing with criminals. Criminals like to cheat. Criminals like to steal. Criminals hate each other. Or an almost blatant disregard for the overall for betterment of the whole. The dark stank, they don't care about the dark stank, they just care about themselves. And an almost universal selfishness to want their own desires, individual desires, regardless if it helps, it hurts the rest of the crew. They all hate, so hate each other comes naturally. So one of the mountains seems to be at risk. There's an almost sort of feeding frenzy that occurs, like Hollywood right now, which I am sure they learned by watching the telltale attributes of their own pets, like the jackals. When one gets hurt, the others circle, start yipping themselves almost into out of control, into frenzy, and ready for an attack. The selfish frenzy for flesh, even their own kind, is so intoxicating that it will often result in the attackers now fighting amongst themselves for the key first and tender bites, leaving themselves again vulnerable from the blind side to attacks from others. More wounded, a repeated performance until some extremely exacerbated occurrences, entire packs are wiped out, leaving maybe just one or two injured and exhausted, late to the party fringe participants who only jump in at the last moment when the pile has become a playground of bloody, maimed, wounded, crawling for themselves from the mayhem of just laying there, or just whelping in mercy because they've been all fighting each other so badly that they're all injured or at the point of death. Is this what the white hats wanted all along? Grab one or two, watch them turn turkey on their buddies, spill the beans, go Judas on as many as they can? Well, they sing like canaries when they got their feet to the fire, setting a whole temple ablaze, and then watch the others jump in, thinking they can capitalize on the slaughter merely to make themselves vulnerable by showing their hands, exposing their necks for other bites, other turncoats, aka the media, education, government, even food or transportation industry. More wounded, more laptops seized, more stoolies, light suddenly shining on all these rat bastards that have taken 30 pieces of silver or a drink from the baby blood bottle, baby blood bottle, and now find themselves knee deep in the giant bag of fighting cats, fighting jackals, crazy demon bites, vampires. It would seem so that is, if this is the case, and I would venture to say, based on the new evidence that seems to pop up everywhere, regardless if it's being fleshed out or tattled among friends, this strategy would be utmost and most assuredly God-inspired, proving once again that the easiest way to defeat the enemy, the entire enemy, doesn't matter what it is, storm, disease, affliction, poverty, the entire enemy is turned, proven once again, the easiest way to defeat the enemy, the entire enemy is turn on it this very same way it often uses as its own main mode of operations against itself. Discover how it attacks, and it gives you the best offense for counterattack. Divide and conquer. So, divide and conquer. That is the main weapon of the enemy. They've been using it for centuries. So, why not use it on them? And while we have the subject of the mountain calling, as I mentioned earlier, the various mountains, I wrote an article quite a while ago, in September 9th, 2011, publishing it on my paulorpeter.com, which you can check out. All of these articles, many of them I published there. I also published the written form of these blogs I do here, or these videos. Perhaps it would be appropriate to resurrect this article for further study. So I'm going to read this article. Years earlier, when I was only just beginning to try to help people with spiritual truths, God allowed me experiences as well as visions into the spiritual to bring the understanding. These in this case, in the form of a dream, even one where I might have just started trying to help people in my own office with spiritual therapies. Surreal is the only word that comes to mind as I stand and observe the storm churning just outside the edge of my vision. Its rolling black and gray clouds turning silently around the ominous dark black hole of the eye that peers out of the even darker recesses of the spirit that resided inside. It tumbles of dirty dishwater whites, shadows of pain's pigments, and accented with flat blacks as my painting history coming out. Do little to reflect any light, as it just exists within the edges outside the glance of light's piercing sight. With the continual flashes within what appear to be lightning explosions, these dim projections grant only limited illumination of the whole. As short bursts or only marginal effort, light erupts inside the clouds. The swirling, cyclonic-looking thing that strangely appears like a smaller representation of a hurricane is in some kind of aerial distant view in my mind's eye, gives its ominous presentation within the remaining shadow recesses of my soul. It grants a little remaining emotional tug to just turn and run. For not long ago was the time when such approaching dread was enough to send this child scurrying for any dark cave possible. I'm describing this dream, this image that popped into my head, as more will come. Run and hide was the siren's call, as I used to just flee to the not-so-safe place, burying my face between my knees, shivering in a pathetic prostrate pose. Oh, how we quivered in fear, drenched face, waiting for the blows to dispense across naked body. or its filthy hand in his foul, stedge breath, stick its clammy sweat grip, move across in selfish lust, or taking what she wants, then finally tiring me, moving past, allowing me once again to relax in shame and disgust. It would leave only the salt sting burning of my own swollen eyes, or the dried sweat and dirt that covers the pain it just inflicted. But not this time, for as I stand and watch it approach, strange as it may seem, there is no thunder in those flashes. Has it always been so? For this time I stand not alone, but with me is one who lends but a hand. Two people stand in this therapeutic hope, talking. In the dream changes now. And in his dream, he knows her, but he really doesn't. It's almost like he knows he should know her. But in this life, hardly knew when or how, not at least in this life, his physical own, but merely a recognition of someone who is important, valuable, a treasure, soon to be found, maybe. Yet one thing he does know is the feeling that is pressing yet again, a horde of attackers mounting just to her right, distracting, engaging, beckoning her to turn, listen, act, as though their increasing calls play across the surface of her mind. You don't understand, she says, as her body language takes her own arm and wraps them around herself once again in a desperate attempt to protect herself. I was sitting in this particular part of my dream in my own office now, talking to this person. When everything is saying run like she has done so many times before, something is grounding her feet against the stone, familiar, if but alien in experience. What is good? A small sense that rests deep within. She backs up against the hard surface of the chair behind her, feeling secure of this cold but receptive metal. If nothing else, security of the firm chair she sits in. For these two people, the conversation turns not towards or away from God, because in and around God's every breath, words seem to flow. For they are both children that have dedicated their lives in every step to that which is the Father would direct, but merely words revealing visions into a corner of their lives that have remained but a remnant of dark's past. There ash sits, giving the enemy but a crack in which to attack. Just softly she says, why does God not give me deliverance from these attacks? For they seem to come over and over, years, and there's nothing I can do. Everything and all possible explanations have been offered, deserving or not. She has tried it all, fighting over and over from the quiet corners of her bedroom as heartless attackers press in from all sides. For the man listening, a rookie at best in such fights or health concerns, his recent victory has, if nothing else, granted him a relief from fear, and this seeming strength is all she might need to this time stand. If in but a mustard seed size, but it is still in hope, for the shadow is playing across her face, even as her legs plant firm and her feet settle in for the crash of the wave that is sure to come. A man believes in his own calling, but with it only recent experience of trying to help in these more spiritual realms, not only recently revealed. His mind desperate in his thoughts, trying to comprehend what is happening to this daughter of God, sweet face, and teary eyes of a woman presented before him, difficult from his perspective to understand, for little or no experience as he had to draw upon dealing with dark sirens. There is a shadow's recognition in his mind as her words pull back the veils of memories not all too long forgotten. A lifetime of torment, always from the similar voices, seeming attacking when any and all words or thoughts go into a godly realm, especially within that of a recent found medical spiritual calling. For him, the pull to flee is not one out of fear, but frustration. But nevertheless, strong as the talons that claw mercilessly on his flesh. For here again stands a woman before him, one of heart, has only just begun, feeling of genuine concern that he's beginning to feel for her as she tells her story. And she slams the door in his face immediately with comments like, "You don't understand. You can't understand. You can't really help me." Pride of the man is a difficult thing, so easy to run when its ugly face stares back at you from the mirror. But this man has also recently learned that running is never an option for the territory that the Lord has told you to take. One thing is for sure, he knows for certain it is not him who may help her, but merely info he may be privileged to pass on to her. In his mind, those words he has heard many times before, and maybe even yelling back at him from the mirror of his own thoughts, "You're stupid. I don't need you. I don't want you." Do hell have an effect to test his own confidence, as little as it may be in these initial days may give. But compassion, a sense of hope, a soft voice in his ear, words of encouragement, peace, potential ring greatly across the surface of his heart. They turn also prompt him to stand, fight, encourage. And he enters into the prayer language with his own words of the Holy Spirit inside of him. A soft language, utterances, not understood by him and even heard by human ear. Yet their meaning is clear. Lord, grant me the strength, wisdom, and clarity of word. Let my words be your words, my thoughts yours. And if possible, allow me to enter into battle for this precious daughter of yours, fully armored, cleared in sight of the enemy, that I may help her attack. I may help her in this attack, and intercessory onto the battlefield to fight the enemy that oppresses her. Suddenly, a vision shifts, and another dream within the dream explodes in his mind. And on the battlefield, in a dark, sinister plain, a man stands and looks across the field of tens, maybe even hundreds or more attackers, all under a single standard, a gonfalon of Jezebel carrying her naked image proudly before them. He is the same man, but noticeably different. Rests across his frame, shoulders broader than before on earth, for burdens not of his own must be carried. He sets his jaw in prominent resolve, look of contemplated battle, etching strong crevices that have developed from the veteran experience mark of his gaze. What little veteran he has developed so far. Yes. The lines of the enemy approach, confidently spitting, spouting out their own insults like rotten garbage flying out, an indiscriminate bombardment. They bounce ineffectively against the shiny round shield he carries. The enemy assembles in advancing line. They carry black, large, rectangular shaped shields covered with bloody animal skins of all description. And while they press forward, they hold back in conscious defense. For many of their ranks, she is already decimated, and something different is in the air today. Names screech from black guzzles: nudity, lust, pornography, adultery, lesbianism, homosexuality, seduction, temperance, sex, more sex, flinging out like bloody spear tips, lunging out in their merciless death. There's almost a casual confidence in their attack, for they seem to have been down this road many times before. Casual, if it were not for the unknown adversary standing before them suddenly. But then again, unknown is he not? Without hesitation, the armor-clad warrior of bright reflected light, bright white and blue, glass-like clarity, unsheathed sword, and in a defiant yet thunderous cry, the warrior calls of the warrior's call of a known word, yet known deep within himself, and gathering from the look of fright in the faces of the front line, recognized by them as well, with almost a power of his own, as his eye sees the attacking horde, he is propelled into the flight like riding a wave of light, like riding on a surfboard on a wave. With almost eye-blinking speed, he charges the line, then now attempting to spastically interlock shields in fearful desperation. He crashes into the lines as spears snap and bounce off the armor like dry twigs, spit against the chest of the massively strong horse crashing through the brush. Enemies are tossed and flung in horror. The scene is almost comical, reminding the onlookers of similar images when a young child once crashed through a pile of balloons. With such ease did he blast the gaping hole of their lines. A large crevice he has already made, swirling his sword and shield in almost symphonic rhythm. Enemy bodies flying in every direction, as easy as loose paper would be tossed by a leaf blower. He half expects the attack from his left flank, but he turns his head to catch a glimpse of that side. He sees her standing. No pass, pressing her own attack there. She's clad in the most beautiful armor, feminine in build, but no less effective or threatening. Polished to a mirror-like shine, perfection. Light yet strong, long, lean, girding protection, both arms and legs. She firmly plants her feet on the rocky surface and uses all her strength to press the nearly body-length shield before her. The chest plate that protects her frame has distinctly feminine look, almost terminating into a short skirt around her waist. Tens of armies are held back as they squirm against the power of her legs and arms, and the warrior's power granted in her the blood of the lion that flows within. He almost stops his own attack as he considers the mix of majesty, beauty, grace that she displays, balanced on the delicate movements of her perfect rhythm. Movements that seem more rhythmic, like a dance, rather than more aggressive nature of a man. Her arms circle with deadly accuracy that follow only by the wisp of her pure white hair swaying softly under her helmet. Hard is it to decide if she's laughing or crying as the roar of the lioness pierces all the minds within earshot. As quickly as one slithers or squirms around her defenses, bodily damage is decisively dispensed from her right arm, wielding a short but effective and brightly armored sword, resulting in an incapacitated carcass, depositing yet another head at her flank. The enemy is not eager to attempt to engage in the place where the comrade had just fallen. As both fighters open up a larger and larger gap in the now dwindling horde, a clear light is seen on the other side of the rushing line, matching in luminosity to the bodies and the armament of our two fighters. The distant yet approaching light quickly grabs the attention of the enemy as well. Just as suddenly a narrow gap opens, and with a rush, two angels fly through the other side in an almost aerial swoop. The two beautiful white, blue, blazing angels fly past the enemy, out to the two battling warriors. Then they drop glowing vials of clear, bright, and blue-white liquid onto the heads of the bodies of these two children, engulfing them further in God's brightness. They're immediately refreshed with vitality. Lost is any exhaustion suffered by the attack so far. Both warriors glance up with smiles on their faces, and it's clear to any observing that the smiles are not as much precipitated by the angelic visit, but have already been long on their faces, for they have gotten to the point in the battle where victory was assured, and a sort of mopping up feeling has come across their eyes. As quickly as the prayer leaves his lips, the word of God descends into his heart, and suddenly he's brought back to the memory of his own attacks. He is not in words or voices, relentless or distracting, but in images, a lifetime of visual images. How long has this image of all the same attackers haunted him? His whole life, for as long as he can remember, since he was a small child. Wasn't it only until just recently, only since he has found his calling, that victory was granted, that relief from unending attacks, the constant bombardment that would always leave him doubting his own faith, strength, or importance to God. How he hates the enemy for what it has done to so many children, including the beautiful daughter standing before him. A soft yet strong voice speaks in his mind and heart, and as quick he repeats the word for both of them to hear, if but for the first time. Find your calling, your mountain calling, that which you were designed from even the beginning of time, and much of the same will be your reward. Soft is the smile of recognition in her eye. The first reward granted is the form of deliverance from your enemies. You will see not only your enemies flee from you, but when you take your mountain, your kingdom, the amount of enemy attacks will go down significantly. So was it with me, he says, as he marvels at the beautiful peace that crosses her face almost instantaneously. What was just a moment ago a frown and worry across her brow, frustration lining her mouth, even swollen, wet, Anger in her eyes is suddenly replaced by soft, smooth hope across her face, tearing eyes with a glimmer of joy, one that is bright, clear, a gentle touch of a smile just beginning to erupt from the heart that beats within. She knows the words are true because she hears them herself as well. They speak soft in a dream's deja vu she has dared to hope true. Wow, he almost erupts and laughs. That is so incredible. The things that have tormented me my whole life were the very spirits that we have been learned have held us both back from finding out the mountain calling. He says with increased excitement, not even as much as tell her, but also realize himself and maybe to one day tell others who are so close. They both explode in an exchange of words and ideas, the 7 mountain callings. Family, including relationships, children, friends, are tormented and held back by abandonment. Religion, any and all callings in the ministry, is attacked with pride or selfishness for money. Business, including all jobs, work in public businesses, receive torment by greed. Government, including all ruling authorities, police, military service, civil service, they can be held back by corruption and a controlling nature as well. Education, teachers, students, even schools build the biggest obstacle is humanism. Media, including news, television, reporting, journalism, their giant is fear. Fear of being rejected. And finally, the arts, including anything creative, fine art, music, acting, dance, cooking, writing, they are all tormented by immorality. Find your mountain calling, that one area that you've been designed from the beginning to fulfill. And you will probably find you have had the greatest torment in your life in and around the sin of that demon who would discourage you the same. It wasn't only the torment that I found in my mountain, my calling, and thank God he actually told it to me, but I needed to start working in it, dedicated it to him utterly and completely. And then and only then did I suddenly realize that I had taken dominion over it and the enemy would flee. The awareness came across both of them almost simultaneously. Now I'm back to the dream, for they both know the story, the efforts lately with their calling of God, but the revelation descended upon them like a vial of pure liquid wisdom flowing down their heads across their bodies, right into every part of their being. So does the wisdom of God flow through a child, strengthening, healing, and birthing his stepping stones anew. Looking back, it is not all that difficult to see which area an individual may have been tormented almost as long as he can remember. What is difficult is the memory. Was it a dream or day, a time, vision? That much has eluded me, but the image is carved into my heart, as clear as it was yesterday. One of many possibilities showing up as the first sin they have witnessed in this world, maybe seen in others. Most likely through the hands or words of their parents, seeing and experiencing these continued yet subtle attacks can shake and crack the very foundations we should have built in our life. Those which were designed out of the sanction of God's love, they became cracked surface we stumble over. So do we live in a fallen world. And in most cases, it could turn them, even at a very early age, from deserving the very area God would have them take dominion. That single mountain he has given them, everyone has that given one. Every talent, every skill, every life experiencing, turning every storm into good, every sin into experience to help others. So they could absolutely be the best at one thing he would have them do in this entire world. Before I read out, I'm going to give you a little story. I've always been good at art. I grew up poor, so I wasn't going to be one of those corner art painters painting paintings on some corner. So medicine it was for me. I had to go into the medicine. The most assured, a lot of assurance that ended up being. But that's what I did. Well, when I was in Holland, I was playing sports. That's how it brought me there in the first place, running track, etc. And then I was over there and I fell in love with my first wife, and I decided to stay and go to school in Holland. And I played sports, played on a sports team. They had everything was private there. You didn't have school teams, although they did have school competitions, but it was very minor. It wasn't like it is here. But we did participate in private, groups like clubs, club football, club basketball, club korfball, club whatever. And I was in the group, and we did pretty well. And we always had the same people from our team would sit around and have beer after the game, or even at halftime sometimes. And so we would sit around, and of course, all the guys, you would all buy your beers. There was always one guy that was always last. He waited till everybody bought one, about 7, 8 rounds, and then he'd get up, I got to go, and he'd leave. Jan. I'm not going to give his last name. But Jan wasn't the smartest of the guys. It soon became apparent that he was pulling the wool on everyone's eyes. Some people stopped buying him beers because he never bought. It turned out that Jan could barely speak Frisian, let alone he couldn't speak Dutch. He couldn't speak English. He really never got past the lowest level of school because he couldn't really do much of anything. He couldn't really read or write, couldn't do mathematics. So he was in the lowest level of school, and he barely got in that. And before you knew it, he had to go and quit school and help his father. Father was a farmer or something. But I knew his father had like a side business. He liked to make furniture. Well, as things progressed, he was working on his furniture, and Jan would do his farm work. And then one day, the father, I heard this later, and I asked, I said, whatever happened to Jan? They go, didn't you hear about him? Amazing. Really? Yeah, what happened was he went one day, and his father was ill, and his father had some orders. Had to make a dining room table and 8 chairs. We only had 2 done, and table about half finished, and maybe a little dish table to go with it on the side. So father said, can you try to finish these? The patterns are there. Do the best you can, and I'll help you when I'm well, but we need to get this done. I ordered this stuff, and it needs to be done. I don't know why. Jan went in there without any instruction, completed the task, sent the furniture to the buyer or the person who bought the furniture, and when he got it, he looked at it like, whoa, amazing. 4 of the chairs were completely different than the other 4. The table was phenomenal. He looked at it because the workmanship was unparalleled. Before you know it, people started asking questions like, who made this? How did you make this? It seemed that Jan was so skilled, he could make these furniture without the use of glue, screws, or any kind of fastening. He just carved them in a way that they fit together. He was a furniture savant. He can make furniture, and now his furniture, all handmade by him, is wanted all over the world. Everybody has their calling. They just have to find it. What God had put them on this world to do. Okay? Back to the reading. Many examples of my friends and family come to mind. A daughter, a best friend who has been adorned since before they can remember, from those who should have given the more stability and love result, and an inability to establish or keep meaningful and endearing relationships until the point where the thought of family just doesn't fit anymore in their life. These are examples of people who have not made their calling, found it. A father raised in greed, where enormous talents and skills of lifetime success in business leads only to loneliness and despair. For the single question remains, for what purpose did I even live this life? A teacher forced to teach that people are but an accident, insignificant, evolved. Then wonder why they lose hope when looking in the faces of children who have none. Preachers, ministers, a child with a calling from her youth, an apostle's calling, But when pride doesn't allow her to hand the mic and listen to the derelict child God has chosen to give the word this day, she misses the greatest gift of her life. Her mountaintop victory out of fear of seeming less important turns into a downward spiral. How many people have gone into the government office with the purest of intentions just to be corrupted by the multitude or magnitude of power and left but a dark, burnt cinder of the man who or woman who was? Probably not nearly as many that have turned away from the calling because of the corruption they have witnessed their whole lives. How many news reporters have manipulated millions with fear instead of building people up with the hope and faith? Actors, actresses, artists, musicians, writers who have fallen short of what God would have had them become because distractions and the destruction of immorality, and it goes on, and the dream continues. Two warriors now sit next to each other, breathing hard from the spiritual exertion after these dreams have flowed through their bodies and they have defeated these enemies in the spirit. Their fleshy bodies will soon feel the exhaustion the souls have wielded. But laughter, heartily as beating horde retreats, squealing like pigs, tail stalks running for the dark trees on the edge of the field. The remained and wounded are bound in Jesus' name and hardly with a word disappear into the void as quickly as a subtle word dances across to God's children's mouths. They can almost hear the cries of frustration ringing in the trees as the leaders below bellow in sorrow. For defeat it will be as painful as binding and banishment these comrades have suffered. Yeah, when the bosses don't complete their tasks in witchcraft, in that sort of thing, they get in trouble, and they don't like that. They don't like the punishment that occurs. Two tall, magnificent warriors look onto the field together, swords sheathed and shields by the side, standing strong in faith that comes not only in victory, but in the added confidence of experience they now have gained. For the first time, they see the light that shines mightily through the beautiful red-lined clouds of the north of the new morning sky. It streams of white and rainbows, light shades, and in turn transforms all of the dark of the dry ground into a soil of life. A fresh new blanket of dew across the hungry soil. Small green leaves push their heads out of the ground. So eager are they to see the wonders of God in this fresh garden of his son or daughter. The battle's not over, but now the enemy is on the run. Mountain is clear in sight. It won't be long before complete victory is realizing, transforming this tormented landscape once again into a lush garden it was designed to be. She sits comfortably in the new car and opens the door and climbs out as she returns home to tell her family the battle she has witnessed. With joyful gleam, a pure smile of excitement suddenly erupts from her voice. She explains how just recently a dream and maybe more God has spoken to her about things she was to do. It seems impossible, but almost miraculously, her voice is wrapped up in the vision of what God would want for her in her life. And she just knows that it was what she has been destined to do from creation. Could it be that skill she has always believed she possesses, maybe even had talent for, yet always feared trying, could be the one she was destined to overcome? Of course, with the injection of Jesus' truth in every step, just the realization brings almost instantaneous relief from her torment. She is so excited at the prospect. Amazingly, the voices have already lessened, the dark voices, but more importantly, the deep sense of victory. For this time, she has held firm. Victory feels good. Suddenly, she doesn't feel as helpless as she used to feel from these attacks. Hope has already transformed into faith. But now what? She asks, as much to herself in prayer, but also to herself verbally and to the Father. Now you must hear the Father what he would have you do. A soft man's voice speaks inside of her in confident happiness. You are walking his path. Your eye never leaves him. We both know that. For it says in Matthew, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all things will be given unto you. I guess he has to tell you, the voice says with an almost playful confidence of a schoolgirl might share when talking the same to a would-be. He prompts her to do the things or say the things she knows about herself. And when he does tell you, you must try it immediately. And if you don't see any results, because that's how it takes you. Sometimes you got to start climbing from the bottom up. It might just not even look like a mountain on your first step. It's a foothill. It might just be the first step out of the valley. But keep climbing. You'll get there. Seeing the mountain, realizing the mountain is yours is not enough. But it is through practicing and working with your calling that the victory is imminent. And the voice coming out of her is her own, even though it's an older, wiser version. Even she's having trouble distinguishing between her own and utterances of the tongue, not even foreign to her, but distinctly a father's. It is then that the king's reward, or in this case, the queen's reward, will be given, and a sudden rush of pure anointing flowed over her body, one watching and the other listening, cascading from the heads to their feet as if some angel just poured a vial of blessing over them. And the words flowed out so easily, hard to remember who said what, because both were talking almost simultaneously. For the word flowed, that ran out as easy as spring gushes forth from the ground. And at this point, the information flows like a narration from deep within the clouds that surround the sea. And the king's reward comes 5 stages. And remember, it comes when you find your mountain calling. Put into practice with a mountaintop effort and an establishment in your mind, making you your promise to God, no matter what. You are going to continue down that path. The king's reward comes, or queen's. The mountaintop effort is putting God into every aspect of what you do, seeking him first, whether it be work, art, education, governing, your relationships, teaching, or even the ministry. Finding how easy it is within yourself to put our wants and desires before God, but alternately as well how easy it is to dedicate your very step, your every thought onto the path of the Father. The only difference is the promises that follow are guaranteed by God. When it comes to man, well, I guess you just have a man's chance. So what are the kingly rewards exactly? First, the king receives deliverance from enemy attack. And yes, well, he's not completely impervious to any enemy attack. The chances of the effectiveness of future attack distinctly reduces. The cleaner the kingdom is kept from spy or enemy infiltration from within, the better it is. Second, the king receives praise from everyone, even those visiting and residing outside his domain. People sing his praises as to his success. The way it is when you're king. The work of the hand of the king brings not only praise of the people, but immediate, undeniable good to the people. So those around you prosper, your family, your friends, as you prosper. Promise from God. Third, he receives the spoils of war, restoration of everything the enemy has stolen, even to an excess. The interest, 7 times what the enemy has taken, calculated over the entire life of the king, has been under attack. This could be a lifetime repayment from an enemy. And notice it comes from the enemy and not God's people. For the king gets gold. This is not the same as spoils, but tribute. Gold, which represents the purity of heaven in heaven. It's a gift from God. That which truly does belong to God reigns upon the king, not only his enemy, but also from all around. Those visiting the king as a gesture of their appreciation for what he does. And finally, 5, the king has a feast. A great celebration, even set in the presence of his enemies. What is the definition of feast? Anything your eye sees, you may have abundance, more than enough for the entire family, even his children, his kingdom. Or in the words of a younger generation, party, party, party. 2 perfect examples of a like calling ending distinctly different. Saul and David, both kings, both realized their calling, both conquered armies. But the only difference, David did every step, every word, his path in deliberation and consideration of the Father. And for this, he received a king's reward. David took the mountain. Saul never got out of the valley. Yeah, that's a lot being said about mountain callings, about giants guarding the place of mountains. For me, like I said, I always said I was gifted in art. But I was very good in science and math. I was horrible in English because I had a little bit of ADD, I think. I don't know. I think they didn't have it then, but knowing what I know now, I could read and I wouldn't understand. I would daydream. I wouldn't understand what I read. So reading was difficult. So I avoided reading and writing with the pest. Science classes, I took extra math so I could skip the English, skip the language. Did the same in college. If you're good enough in math, science, you can skip it, test out of it. So I did as much as I could. And then one day I'm sitting asking God, talking to God and asking him, I'm on the precipice of probably one of the near-death experiences in my life where I'm about to be killed in every aspect, physically, mentally, or spiritually. And I call out to God. I say, what? What am I going to do? Help me. And he does. So a day later, I think, go back to God, find out some more. So I go back and I say, God, what do you want me to do? I can go down to the valley. I don't really like being there anymore. I could go back to my work I used to do. I can stay here and do the work I used to do, therapy. I can do it somewhere else, internationally. I'll even volunteer. I'll quit and go do it for ministries. You choose. Multiple choice. God, what do you want me to do? I'll give you 4 choices. God looked at me and goes, I want you to write. He might as well told me, I want you to speak Chinese, because I didn't write. I didn't really hardly read, but I did read a little bit by that time, yeah. Write. Write what? Silence. What do you want me to write? Silence. Why? Because that's what you do. So I started writing. Didn't know what. Just wrote different things. And now it's all I do. I write. I write more than I treat. I do a little bit of videos, but it's not as much as I write. I write a lot. Written a lot of books. 10, 12 books. Only published 3 of them, but I'm getting there. I'll eventually get them all published. The giants seem to be fighting amongst themselves. Interesting. Why? Is that some kind of strategy? Seems like it to me. When one of the mountains starts to shake and the giant falls, now there's that feeding frenzy and they are vulnerable. Then they get arrested. Laptops. Turning turkey on their friends. Giving up the goods. Before you know, there's 20 others that are arrested. Hey, and they start turning turkey too. They got to save their skin. They don't want their heads chopped off. No firing squad. They drank the baby blood, but hey, I'd rather have a life sentence than have myself shot. Okay. And so they start to fall. There's a feeding frenzy, a mass exodus as people start to turn on each other. As tunnels start to get flooded. Secrets start to come to the surface. 600 of them. Before you know it, it's going to be happening all over the place. Yeah, they can't keep their secrets. Everything is made known at the end. That's God's words, not mine. Knowing we are climbing God's mountain leaves no room for the giants. Come against the giant. You got three choices. You can run, you can take the beating, take the pill, or you can fight. I like the fight one, especially when God tells you to go fight. Then you know you're going to win. Because if you see him before you and you know how to fight, it's easy. No room for giants. Only the residual team on the other side for these giants to fight among themselves. And through their own disclosures, tattling, and desire to be known. Oh, the spirits love to be known. Gives the game away for everyone who happens to have a misfortune of being on their team. I hope you're not on their team. If you're reading this, you probably aren't. I would hope not. You're on God's team. Start climbing your mountain. And if you don't know which one it is, chances are the one that you've had the biggest giant on when you were little is it. For my wife, she is a beautiful entertainer, danced in front of kings on elephants. Did the Wheel of Fortune in Phoenix, in Holland, like the Vanna White of Holland. Circuses, magic acts, dancing in the National Circus of Austria. But when she was young, she come around the corner, and she's got a beautiful voice. I knew music. She comes around the corner, and when she was very little, she heard her teacher say, "Oh, she's got a horrible voice. She should never sing." And from that moment on, she was afraid to sing. So she danced. But she really has a beautiful voice. So, and she's just starting to let it out. So if you're one of Nino's insiders, and you have joined his group to try to get their products from American, that thing he's doing, you probably will get to talk to her. I'll put her picture in this blog so you can see. Very, very, she knows the stuff and she knows what's going on. She is an insider, intel officer of mammoth proportions. She knows it all. She speaks like 7-8 languages, so she ought to. All right, my friends, we'll finish with a small prayer. Dear Lord Jesus, help us in this most dark time to realize our mountain calling. Then grant us the wisdom to take it. Show us your path in every step, and thank you, dear Lord, for your abundant blessings as we praise you for the infinite ones you have already given us. Until next time, this is Peter Colla from Spiritual Therapies with Peter and Anna Colla, our new name. Don't forget, I have Quantum Ascension. A lot of information there about how it works kind of thing, and this one. Heal yourself for God's sake. All those miracles and different experiences I had for the 35 years of treatment. I got others that are coming. Got a book on autism coming out soon. Yeah, you can free your children of autism. It's very easy. I've helped people. That's coming. I got another one too about cancer. Hope to get that one done soon. Excuse me. And support my dear friend Nino, David Nino Rodriguez. He is busting his ass and very difficult what he has to do because he brings all the cutting edge truthers right up to the edge there. A lot of people that are themselves I'm fighting a medical battle with people. It's not easy. Pharmaceutical companies, insurance companies are ruthless, cold-hearted. They lie, cheat, steal. They don't care as long as they control people. And they hate it when I help people free them of the jails. But that's what I do. So if you want to help us, you can. We don't monetize. So what little support we have, we try to make from these book sales, which we have not sold a lot, but we've sold a few. So you can help us there. And we also have a GoFundMe. We want to open a office for people to come to get spiritual therapy. In the meantime, you can contact me if you want me to speak. I do public speaks. I do book sightings. I have spoken in churches. I have spoken in workshops. I've done many workshops, trainings, etc. So you can contact me and we can see how we could do something together, or I can be a guest. I would love to do that and get the opportunity to do that again. Anyways, you have a blessed day, and please contact me if you have any questions. I love answering emails. posture.is.everything@gmail.com. Send me an email with a question. Last video I did was questions and answers. I'm going to do another one soon. Might actually do one right after this. And answering various questions that people have posed from a mind, body, and spiritual therapeutic application. Take care, friends. Please subscribe and share these videos with others if you can. That's the only thing that really makes me happy, is if they touch the right person, and God wants it to just touch one person. That's all it's worth it for me, just that one person. Take care. Bless you.